What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another mailbag. Now, I've put this off a couple of days because I've been going down a rabbit hole and looking at potential merch options. I'm going to try and relaunch merch in about a month. A lot of you don't know that we did sell merch far in the past, but there are some problems with the print provider and that sort of thing, and now I can actually post merch below videos. So I'm trying to come up with some cool concepts, some cool ideas, some cool designs, and find the best system for that. So I've been diving down that rabbit hole instead of making this video the past couple of days. So a little bit late, but better late than never. I'm gonna answer about 30 of your questions from today. There might be a couple that I didn't include because they were similar to other questions, but I always try and include every question, make your guys' voice heard, give you guys a little shout out on the channel. It's always cool to be able to do that. Anyway, let's jump straight into things with Pineapples, who's a channel member. Thank you, Pineapples. He says, when are we getting that Jeremy Grant player preview? Could be a good video for fans. And the last half of September, I will be doing daily uploads with some player previews. I'm going to try and get ahead on them in the month of August. I'm not going to upload much in August. That'll allow me to get ahead on some videos, but player previews will come between September 15th and September 30th, sometime around then, and then we'll be jumping into the preseason. Culture Buckets, another channel member. Thank you, Culture Bucket. Says, any predictions for the trade deadline? Who should the Blazers target? And I've gotten a lot of questions about the trade deadline next year. It's just so hard for me to even predict what could happen next year, given the fact that we don't know what this team is going to look like. If this team is a 60-win team at the deadline, I don't think you could be a 60-win team at the deadline, but if they're a really good team at the deadline, then I don't see them making a move. If they're struggling, then they definitely will. Who knows what that move might be? Who knows who might be available? It's just really hard to say, so honestly, I don't have any predictions. Just if the season's not going well, I expect them to try and make a splash, and if it's going well, then they probably sit pat. Here's a question from Robert Covington Stan. They might need a new YouTube name, so maybe Jabari Walker Stan would be a pretty good pick. But shout out to Robert Covington Stan with the question of, do you think we'd ever pursue a star with a deal of Simons, Sharp, picks, and cap filler? Do you think we'd give up our future to capitalize on the rest of Lillard's prime, or do you think we're going to ride it out and pass it off to Simons and Sharp and never truly rebuild? We could. It would just take a really, really good player to become available to trade Simons, Sharp, and then potentially picks. Like, it'd have to be a superstar caliber player. The most obvious one is Kevin Durant. The Blazers right now cannot trade Anfernee Simons. They cannot trade him until January 15th, so that would require Kevin Durant still being on the Nets on January 15th, but Simons, Sharp, picks, and cap filler is a pretty good package for Kevin Durant given what's supposedly on the table right now. But if the Blazers look like a contender next year, say they figure it out defensively with the addition of Gary Payton II, having Josh Hart, maybe Dame improves now that he's healthy, then I don't see the Blazers making that sort of splash. Jordan says, do you think Ant will be an all-star next season? Love the vids and streams, keep it going. Love from Germany. Here's actually a side note. Fun fact, I was born in Aschaffenburg, Germany. Jordan, I don't know if you know where that is, but my father was a soldier stationed overseas. I'm not German by any means, but I was born in Germany, born with dual citizenship. So it's always cool for me to get some love from Germany. Appreciate it, Jordan. Will Ant be an all-star this season? It would require him averaging 23, 24 points per game. The guard group in the West is absolutely loaded, so he'd have a lot of competition, and it would likely require the Blazers being a top 3 or 4 seeds, so there's a lot that would go into that. I don't think he will be an all-star this season, but there is an outside shot of it being possible, just like there always was an outside shot with CJ McCollum being an all-star. I feel like all those CJ McCollum potential all-star talks are now going to be given to Ant, and he definitely has the talent to make a case. It's just there's a lot more that goes into it. Shout Jonathan Yu, who says, from your most recent lineups video, what do you find more probable throughout the course of the season? Jabari Walker or Shaedon Sharpe taking rotational minutes? What sort of narratives could you predict about the team for this season, such as big depth haunting us early or struggles on the rebounding end? I think that Shaedon Sharpe is more likely to get minutes than Jabari Walker simply because he's extremely talented and he has long-term upside, and the Blazers might elect to play him a little bit just to develop him, even if he's not 100% ready. As far as the narratives go, I don't know about big depth haunting us. I think that's kind of injury dependent. If healthy, I think we might be okay, given that the league has gone a little bit smaller, but it definitely could be a problem. And struggles on the rebounding end. I haven't talked enough about rebounding, but that might be an issue. You have some good rebounding guards and wings. Josh Hart is a phenomenal rebounder. Gary Payton II can rebound. Dame is solid for a point guard for sure. Jeremy Grant just struggles rebounding the ball. So that's something for Jeremy Grant this season. He needs to be a better rebounder. There's no reason he should be as bad of a rebounder as he is. And when you play small ball, that is definitely a concern. So it'll be interesting to see how the rebounding plays out. Dion Webb says, what is yours and Eric's realistic expectation for this team? Play-in, first round exit, deep playoff run, or championship? I would say probably a first round exit at this point, but I do think this team has a higher ceiling than the team last year did, which is funny because I thought last year's team was going to be better than I think this year's team was going to be, and that obviously didn't pan out. I was super high on the team last year, but I think this team has more potential on the defensive end, which naturally gives them more potential as a team because offensively they still have a terrific group in that regard. So I still expect them to be a first round exit, but they could go on a deep playoff run. We'll just have to wait and see. Andy Marchant says, if Jalen Brown gets traded to Brooklyn, would you consider a deadline move for him via an Ant package? What could a realistic package be? In my opinion, it would be risky with Jalen having less than 2 years at this point, but worth a gamble to balance out the roster finally, as tough as losing Simons would be. At the deadline, we'll have more information on how Anfernee Simons fits as a starter. If he's fitting perfectly and maybe better defensively than people expect, then I would lean towards no. But if the team's struggling and Ant's averaging, 15, 16 a game and probably shooting the three ball well, but just isn't the same as when he could just run the ship, then at that point you probably look at trading him for Jalen Brown. So I know it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I'd have to wait and see on that one. A potential package could be Ant plus maybe a couple of picks, or Ant plus a Shaedon Sharpe. I wouldn't give up much more than that for Jalen Brown, though, as Ant, I think if he's the lead guard, truly has all-star potential and could become as good as Jalen Brown is right now. Matthew Baker says, how would you rank every team's coach in the West? We haven't really seen Billups coach, so I'm not expecting him to be very high on the list. And Billups, it still remains to be seen. With coaches of tanking teams, they have terrible rosters, so it's hard to even rank them negatively or positively. But as far as the best coaches in the West, I still think Greg Popovich is a fantastic coach. The thing is, with Pop back in, 2012, 2013, 2014, their offense was unlike anything else in the league, and they were a really good offensive team just based off ball movement, player movement, and that sort of thing. Now that doesn't stand out as much because you have, of course, worse players on the Spurs, but also the league has gotten better offensively. The three-point shot has kind of neutralized some of the advantage that the Spurs offense of years past has had, but I still think Popovich is a terrific coach, and then Steve Kerr is phenomenal as well. Other than that, nobody really stands out to me in the West. Monty Williams, of course, has had some success in Phoenix, but I would put him a tier below Steve Kerr. Other than that, everything else is really hard to rank. Josh Sargent says, if we buy out Dede, can we sign a veteran minimum and stay under the tax? Also, what would the lineup look like with a Ben Simmons if he was available for cheap from Brooklyn to clear space for a Bam trade between the Heat and the Nets? Right now, the Blazers can't trade for Ben Simmons. It'd have to come around the deadline, and in that case, they'd have to trade Jeremy Grant or Anfernee Simons, or I guess you could probably put a package around Yusuf Nurkic. As far as Dede goes, he wouldn't get bought out. Minimum contract guys don't get bought out. They just get released. And his salary would still count against the tax, and then if we signed a minimum, then that would just add on to that, and we're already slightly into the tax, so if we did that, we wouldn't be under the tax. Adam vs. Eve says, if Nurkic gets injured, knock on wood, and we need to get another big, would you want the Blazers to get a Cousins or a Meyers Leonard? If neither of them, then a big you would target. Keep up the great work. Hashtag peace out, go Blazers. Thank you, Adam vs. Eve. I would look at LaMarcus Aldridge, to be honest. Bring him back to Portland. Him finishing his career here would be cool. But last year, he was a solid rim protector and then still scored the ball at an efficient clip. Scored 13 points per game in 21 minutes or something like that. So still a guy that can give you buckets. And as the backup center, can protect the rim a little bit, and, you know, he's getting up there in age, so you expect some decline, but he was still a very solid player last year. I would take a look at him, and then I would take a look at DeMarcus Cousins for sure. Other big men don't enamor me at all, and I'm not too interested in. Moran Saric says, on the scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think the Blazers lineup will be successful? Also, what do you consider as a success next season for the Blazers? I think a success next season for the Blazers would be a top 6 seed, avoiding the play-in, and then making the second round. If they're in the play-in, of course they could still make the second round, but that would mean the regular season wasn't successful, and if they have another first-round exit, then that's definitely a failure. On a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, how about I just give you a wins prediction? I predict this team to win like 46 games. Alex Wolf says, can you think of a good fit team-wise for Collin Sexton? I'm losing my mind waiting for something to happen with him. It's super hard to think of a good fit for Collin Sexton. He's a shooting guard trapped in a point guard's body that some teammates in the past have reportedly had issues with, him being selfish, not passing the ball enough, that sort of thing. That's just what's been reported. And he's coming off a major injury, so he's a talented player, but definitely some major question marks around him, and it's really hard to find a good fit for him. If Utah trades Donovan Mitchell and gets cap space from it, I don't know what their cap situation is. They could trade some other guys. Then that would be a team that could potentially go after him. The Spurs have cap space and just traded DeJounte Murray, so maybe that's a team to take a chance on him. But I honestly think he just signs the qualifying offer and returns to Cleveland and is the 6th man off the bench with, of course, Darius Garland starting, but then Ochai Agbaji being the starting 2. Blazers Jr. says, what is the ceiling and floor of this team in terms of wins and losses, assuming no major injuries to any of our key players? I think the ceiling of this team in terms of wins is 54 wins or so. I think this team has a high ceiling, could be a top 2 or 3 seed in the West. It's just dependent on the defense. But the floor of this team is also pretty low. I could see this team, if healthy, being a 42, 43 win team. I wouldn't go much below that because a healthy Damian Lillard-led team has pretty much always been a winning team, so I would not predict them to have a losing season if healthy, but the floor is probably, 42, 43 wins, slightly above 500. M. Alam says, would the Blazers have the contracts and assets to go get Kevin Durant at the February deadline, and if so, what would be a potential package? They would. Simons, Sharp, maybe Hart as some matching salary. You unprotect the 2023 first that the Blazers owe Chicago, and then you trade potentially 3 future firsts on top of that to Brooklyn, unprotected probably. I think that's as good as a Phoenix Suns or Boston Celtics package. Yes, Jalen Brown is a better asset than anything the Blazers would be giving up, but if you throw Hart, who could be flipped to a third team, and then you have Sharp's upside, and Anfernee Simons has star potential, I think it would be very likely that the Nets would end up with a star caliber asset out of that package, whether from one of the picks, or it being Anfernee Simons or Shaedon Sharp. Rahi says, what is one of your Blazer-related hot takes for this upcoming season, and what is one of your non-Blazer-related hot takes for this upcoming season? My Blazer-related hot take is that Damian Lillard is going to have the best defensive season of his career. A non-Blazer-related hot take is that Kevin Durant is in a Nets uniform next year. Now that one I don't fully believe, but I think there's a bigger chance than people realize. Giannu says, would you rather have Trendon Watford with Greg Brown's athleticism or Nasir Little with Brandon Williams' ball handling? This is a really good question. Comment section, let me know which you would rather have. I would probably say Watford with Greg Brown's athleticism, because if Watford with his ball handling ability, some of his playmaking had that type of athleticism, I think he would be easily an NBA starter. I think that would separate himself a little bit more than Nasir Little having Brandon Williams' ball handling. Felix says, could we do something with the second round picks to get a front court player? PS from Austria. Shout out to Felix in Austria. I think we could. It's hard to say who. I don't think the organization looks to do anything else this offseason. I think this is the roster you're going to see in training camp. But maybe they turn a couple second-round picks and Didi Louzada into a minimum backup big man. I think that would be a solid move, depending on who that backup big is. There's just so many players that could fit that mold that it's hard to even say who that player could be. Shout out to Pontus, who says, do you think that Jabari Walker kind of looks like a mini Grant? And I feel like Jabari Walker could be a Jeremy Grant type of role player in his prime. A guy that can knock down threes consistently, play some perimeter defense. I think Jabari Walker actually has more potential as an on-ball defender than Jeremy Grant. I think Jeremy Grant's a little bit overrated as an on-ball defender, but we'll see this year. He just struggles getting through screens. And then Grant, early on, wasn't a guy that made plays or did much off the dribble, and then he developed that. And Jabari Walker, that's kind of one of the knocks on him coming out of college, is he's not much of a shot creator. But he did show some flashes of that in Summer League, so if he can tap into that and develop that, then I could see him being the next Jeremy Grant. P-Town Made says, do you think anybody on the Blazers can make an all-defensive team this year? And the only guy I could see making an all-defensive team is Gary Payton II. However, that's tough given the fact that he's going to come off the bench. He would need to play at least 27, 28 minutes a game in order for that to happen. And I don't know if he's going to get that sort of playing time, but he is the best defensive player on the Portland Trail Blazers, and really the only one who's a good enough defender to make all-defensive team. Aurelio Diaz says, why is the national media, including Blazers Uprise, so low on Portland? They had to clearly sit all their good players and good bench players to avoid making the playoffs. And I wouldn't say I'm so low on Portland. I just think the West is absolutely loaded this year, and it's hard to put the Blazers much higher than 6th or 7th. I think they do make the playoffs, and they do field a competitive enough team to make the second round, but I can't go higher than 6 or 7. The national media thinks they're going to be 9th or 10th and playing and miss the playoffs with a healthy Damian Lillard, which I think is just kind of ludicrous. I don't really understand why they think a healthy Damian Lillard-led team will miss the playoffs, because it never has. But that's always been the narrative with the national media in regards to Portland. They have never shown the Blazers a ton of respect. Mike says tomato soup or clam chowder. I actually have a vegetarian mindset towards seafood. I don't know why or where it came from, but if I accidentally ate seafood and then you told me, I would feel nauseous. Doesn't really make sense, I know. And people have acted like I'm crazy for saying that in the past, but hopefully one of you in the comments section can relate to that. Justin Ty says, is Ant or Nurk more likely to be an all-star this season? Are very unlikely, as CJ was never one, so probably Nurk. He would need 20, 12, and 5 though. I would say Ant's a little bit more likely. I talked about it earlier, but I just don't think Nurkic is going to have the usage rate or the statistical production in order to become an all-star player. He's been close to 20, 12, and 5 per 36 in the past. The problem is he plays 26, 27 minutes a game. Hasn't proven he can play more than that, so it would also require him playing more minutes than he ever really has. So therefore, I think Ant's more likely. Rip City Brady says, is Josh Hart way better than Harrison Barnes? Brady, I know the perfect person to ask for that.
Dad coach.
Hello?
Yeah.
Torrey Jones.
Torrey Jones. Can I tell you the truth, Torrey? A lot of times when I hear your name, I think about the movie Bridget Jones' Diary. And
I think about
Torrey Jones' Diary.
What?
You're probably too young to even remember that movie. I was young when that movie came out. But that shit was...
Never heard of it.
You never heard of that movie?
Never heard of it.
Bridget Jones' Diary. It was like a Reese Witherspoon movie or some shit like that. She had her moment in Hollywood, man.
Anyway, I came in here because I had a question for both of you.
Yeah.
Is
Apex downloadable?
No, I'm not playing Apex. I'm not playing Apex.
Question.
Is Josh Hart way better than Harrison Barnes?
Yes.
Correct.
I wouldn't say way better. He's just better.
Well, what does way better mean? How much is way?
I think way is like, yeah, he's better at every element of basketball. You know? He's just better.
All right, y'all have fun getting wrecked in Apex.
All right. You doing your mailbag?
I'm recording right now.
Nice.
Bye. Yeah, me and Romp had a debate on this, but and Brady was there, and he decided, yeah, I'm going to ask this in the mailbag. I don't know how much way better is. Josh Hart is definitely better than Harrison Barnes. He's a better slasher. He's a better defensive player. He's a better playmaker. He's a better finisher around the rim. He's a better rebounder. The only thing Harrison Barnes has on Josh Hart is he's a more consistent three-point shooter. So does that quantify as way better? Maybe. Gregor Potts says, I expect Ant to average 24 points on 45, 41, 87 shooting splits. What is your expectation for him? Greetings from Germany. I would say 20 points per game on similar shooting splits. I think it would be hard for him to get up to 24 points per game when you have Dame, Jeremy Grant, Yusuf Nurkic, Josh Hart. I expect to get a lot of minutes. I just don't think he's going to have the usage to be able to put up 24 points per game. But if he shoots even better, then it's definitely possible. Honestly, I think 20 points per game I think about 20 points per game should be the over-under line for his scoring average. Wooda Ruler says, if you had to choose between Tekken 7 or MK11, which game would you choose? Honestly, sorry man, I've never played either of those games. My favorite game's Rocket League, in case you were curious. If you're watching this and you play Rocket League, if you're a solid Rocket League player, hit me up. Ronald Howard says, what type of package would it take to land Thibault? It's really hard to say because he was supposedly available, but then Philadelphia didn't trade him, and I just think at this point, teams are locked into their rosters, so it's hard to say what package it would take. Maybe a couple of second-round picks, but Thibault makes no sense for Portland at this point after they signed Gary Payton II. They have a ton of wing depth already, so I'm not a huge fan of going after Thibault right now. And then the final question for this mailbag says, based on production to date, is Nasir Little worth $9 million annually, which is the same amount that Kyle Anderson, aka Slow-Mo, signed for? And I would have to say yes. His production is right around that level, and then you would be banking on him improving in future years, considering he's still young. I've been on the record saying this is kind of the make or break year for him and his potential payday next offseason when he'll be a restricted free agent, much like it was a make or break year for Anfernee Simons last year, and he got his bag. So there's a chance that he makes a lot more, but I think a baseline amount would be about $9 million. Anyway, that wraps up this mailbag. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well, and I'm out of here. I'll catch you in the next video. Will be an off-season recap, and I will have community poll questions in the community tab in the next day or so stay tuned for that. Follow the channel's page on Twitter, and I will tweet out when I post those polls. Anyway, that's a wrap for this one. I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.